Hello everyone, this is Jorge Diaz, president and founder of Larry Jacob Internet Marketing, and I'm bringing you another episode of Defining Infusionsoft Success. This week I have Greg Jenkins. Greg, how are you?
Hey, really well, George. Good to see you, man.
Good, and this week we're kind of doing something just a little bit different. Greg wrote a blog article about a month back that really struck me, and I'm going to let him kind of get into it, because it wasn't the way you'd expect to be thinking about marketing, but he really paralleled it to something that he's going through this summer.
Yeah, so if you know me, if you followed my brand
at all.
Oh, and
I'm sorry. Introduce yourself.
No, that's all right.
Move your head a little bit. Move your head a little bit over. He's MonkeyPod.
Yeah. Oh, right there. So my brand is all about helping Infusionsoft users specifically get more out of our marketing automation tools and out of their marketing automation efforts. And normally what I talk about is Infusionsoft tricks, tips, the software, integrations, plugins, right? Things like that. But occasionally I deviate from that because marketing lessons just show up in my life, and it gives me ideas for things I can do better in my business. And because the audience that I serve is largely small business owners as well, I oftentimes like to share those lessons in case it helps you as well. So
right, and by the way, we recommend his MonkeyPod Marketing because it's a great way for us, our customers. We don't do a lot of startups, and we don't teach people unless we have to how to use Infusionsoft. So we refer them to him. So his marketing is about promoting his his MonkeyPod tool, which is it's a learning library because he's got a teaching background with Infusionsoft.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah. So where this specific lesson came from is in about May of this year, actually it was specifically May, I was diagnosed with celiac disease. And for those of you who may not have heard of it, celiac disease is an autoimmune disease that affects the way your body digests. And more specifically, it means that my body doesn't process gluten. So you may have heard of people who are gluten intolerant or who have a gluten allergy. And those are kind of on the same scale or in the same cut from the same cloth. But celiac disease is the medical condition that I have where my small intestine just doesn't process gluten, and there's a whole biological effect to that and the way I absorb nutrients. But you don't care about my digestive health.
And it's the whole reason why there's a gluten-free section at the grocery store now, and I think it's probably overblown, but people like you need that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I actually have kind of somewhat mixed emotions about that, because there are people who are electively gluten-free. There are people who are choosing to cut out gluten for one reason or another. And then there are people who are medically prescribed, hey, you can no longer have gluten, and here's the effects it'll have on you if you do. And unfortunately, it goes beyond just gastrointestinal discomfort. There's some pretty serious health consequences as well. So the challenge that I run into is that because of all the people who are electively gluten-free, when I go to a restaurant, if I say, hey, that's gluten-free or I'm gluten-free, the default is people assume, oh, this is some, I live in San Diego and this is some trendy, hipster guy who just wants to, be on the latest diet fad.
Not that anyone would see you and think hipster.
Well, yeah, it's not in this area anyway, but there's worse things to be called for sure. Right. So what I find myself doing is explaining, hey, I have celiac disease, and here's what that means. And the reason that I have to do that is because gluten and it shows up in breads, it shows up in anything that has wheat, rye, oats, or barley. And it's not inherently in barley, but the thing about gluten is it's really sticky, and so cross-contamination is really easy for it to happen, and it can really make you sick in a powerful way.
Yeah, and everybody, there is a marketing lesson here, so hold on.
Yeah, trust me, we're getting to that. And so what's happened is as I'm going places and I'm being more selective about where I'm eating, I'm calling restaurants ahead of time, I'm uncovering that a lot of these restaurants or stores or even airlines or just places that I'm going to be interacting with just aren't really prepared to have this conversation. If you reach out to them, a lot of times they'll say, yeah, we have a gluten-free option. But what they don't say is that this gluten-free option was prepared on surfaces that specifically avoid contamination, right? Because if I order a gluten-free pizza, the crust may not be gluten-free or may be gluten-free, but that doesn't mean the pan it was baked on is gluten-free. It doesn't mean that the surface that it was prepared on is gluten-free, and it doesn't mean that the knife that they cut the pizza with is gluten-free. So these are all lessons that I've unfortunately learned the hard way, because initially I wasn't asking all the right questions. So it's definitely on me as a consumer to be proactive about it. But the lesson comes in that I don't think restaurants are really doing their customers a service if they don't thoroughly understand who they do and don't serve. And the example I'll give is I went to a Mexican restaurant just recently. It's called Tamarindo, and they have tacos and guacamole and all of these things that I love, and a lot of those things are naturally gluten-free. The challenge is if you share, like if you make your own chips in-house, a lot of restaurants will deep fry their chips. Well, if anything else goes in that fryer that has also, has flour or has been, wheat flour or has been, contaminated, well, then I can't eat those chips any longer. And if I can't eat those chips, right, then anything that touches those, right, it goes on and on. And so I went to this restaurant and I just asked, I said, hey, do you have any gluten-free options on the menu? I have celiac disease and here's the deal. And he came back with a list of the menu, and he had talked to the chef, and they had 6 or 7 items that were checked off as being gluten-free. And the more we talked about it, that's when I uncovered the chips issue. And I said, well, I can't have that because it's made, it's nachos and it's made on these chips, and the chips are probably contaminated. So while there is no gluten inherently, right, there is, the risk. And my point is, this restaurant wanted to serve me, and they brought me a menu that they had talked to the chef about, and they still got it wrong. And in having a conversation, we were able to uncover that of the 6 or 7 items that they highlighted, only really 3 were actually gluten-free. And so, so I actually ordered 2 or 3 separate things before we got to that point. And it was really alarming for me, not only how close I was to being poisoned, because that's what it is, right? It's a substance that my body can't handle and has an adverse effect, and therefore is, akin to poisoning me. But not only that I was close to being poisoned, but that this restaurant thought they had done their due diligence. They really thought, hey, we've asked the right questions, we talked to the chef, but it really was just an understanding issue. And the reason I'm bringing this all up, the reason that we're chatting today, is because a lot of small businesses are accidentally poisoning their customers. And here's what I mean, right? You may not be literally poisoning them, or you might be if you're a restaurant, but if you aren't super hyper clear about who you serve and who you don't serve, then you're running the risk of giving someone something that will genuinely make them sick or have an adverse effect on their business. And so I realized that, my business is that way as well. I get, George mentioned, I focus heavily on education. But in the process of my marketing or in my course delivery, I get a lot of requests from people who say, hey, Greg, I just have this one question. Can you hop on the phone and help me with this? Or, what WordPress plugin do you use for that? Or do you have this thing for me? And I want to help everyone, of course. But by reaching outside of the scope of what my business is best set up to support, there's the possibility that I could be doing a disservice to these people, that I'm maybe not the best person to serve them. And I think every business has that, right? And if you're a small business or a startup business, it's hard to say no to work, right? It's hard to turn away customers who want to hire you. But I think that in the long run, you'll be really grateful if you take the time to, clearly define your customer avatar, which involves who they are and what they look like, what problems they have, and what pain points you're trying to solve. But beyond that, to also clearly define who is it that we don't serve, right? What are the types of customers that we're just not the right fit for?
Yeah, and that don't serve is kind of key. Like, for example, because we build membership sites, a lot of people will come to us and they'll ask us, do you do Active Campaign?
Sure.
Or hey, do you know MemberMouse? Do you know MemberPress? And we know Customer Hub, for example, because we pull people out of it, but I don't pull people into it. But you're right. I could come up and stretch our knowledge a little bit and inadvertently, first of all, shoot myself in the foot, because now you're taking on work you're not really well set up to take on. But, poisoning the customer with maybe not the best advice. Where if we're on a Memberium site and it's a good sized one, we're right in our element. And, a customer will come up and say, hey, we want to try this. It's like, no, you don't. Here's why. And it's almost like I can give them a huge litany of reasons why, you know, this is like contaminated oil.
Totally.
You know, like the real detail stuff.
And I think it's just that, right? For every customer that you know, right, there's let's say there's 3 buckets. There's people who you definitely serve, there's people who you definitely don't serve, and then there's the danger zone in the middle, which is the ambiguity, right? That's where, you know, maybe we can fit you in, or this item is probably gluten-free. You know, it's that type of a conversation. And, you know, I'm not blaming that server at the restaurant. The server's job is to make the customer happy. And he's trying to give me the answer that he thinks will make me happy. But unknowingly, he's risking, you know, my health. And that's not fair. But it's a risk that he doesn't fully understand.
Right. And interestingly enough, the damage he's doing to the restaurant.
Totally.
And we do that. I mean, we're in the services business. All you need is a improperly sized project to tank your business, because something you said you could do, and I mean, I'm just picking a number, 20 hours. It's 100 hours. And, you know, not that I've ever run into one of those before. But you're not doing the customer a service, and you're certainly not doing the business a service.
Yeah, I think the most succinct way I can say it is that sometimes the best way to serve your customers is by not serving them. And that takes a lot of discipline to acknowledge that, and to you know, have it become part of your culture, and to teach your team and your employees to identify those and how to best guide them elsewhere. But I'll tell you this, if I walk into a restaurant and I say, hey, I have celiac disease, and you know, do you have a gluten-free option for me that is, you know, it's avoiding contamination, et cetera, and they say, yes, we do, and it's this, we've had this question before, and we're the right fit because of these following reasons, I feel really good about it. If they say, no, I'm sorry, but we batter everything in our whole kitchen. There's, you know, wheat flour in the air.
We'd love to serve you, but bro, we love gluten, and we have it everywhere.
Yeah, I can deal with that, right? Like, that's information I can work with, and I appreciate their honesty. It's the people in the middle that I struggle with, who just haven't made up their mind, or they haven't gotten super clear about where that line is. And I'll give you another example, right? So I used to work at Infusionsoft, and as you know, most people watching most people watching this show probably know, Infusionsoft is a marketing automation.
Didn't you used to be Infusionsoft University?
Yeah. So I did that for about the last 2 years that I was there, which is sort of my foray into the education space, and where the idea for MonkeyPod came from. But Infusionsoft has an awesome sales team. They are great at what they do. But not every business that they bring on board is ready for Infusionsoft. And some of you watching this may have said, yeah, that was me. I signed up too early. And unfortunately, some of the people that they bring on, it does them a disservice, because they're in over their head. Their software is too expensive. You know, their business is too mature.
Right. The business isn't ready for it. Or, you know, for example, I've been at a lot of Infusionsoft like trusted partner presentations where they do a pitch. And you see people running to the back, and it's kind of like, I can't believe they found 25 people in this room that needed it that badly. Yeah.
So to be clear,
and I'm not bashing. I mean, I'm a consultant.
No, of course. Yeah. Infusionsoft is getting better at this, and they're clearly defining their target business stages, and helping people identify, this is who we fit best, and then right outside that, here are the people we can also serve, but on either end of that are the people we really shouldn't be serving. Right. So they're making strides to get clearer about that. But you know, they're imperfect, and they want to grow, and the sales rep probably has the best intentions for that business. But like I said, if you don't clearly define where that line is, you risk doing your customer a disservice. And so that's kind of the lesson of the story here. And it's interesting that it took an autoimmune disease for me to really get clear on something like this, because I didn't think, you know, celiac disease would affect my business one bit. But what it has done is affect my perspective as a consumer.
And your awareness.
Bingo.
And by the way, you know, it's funny. I try not to use the word avatar too much, because it's a buzzword. It's a buzzword, right? But it's really precise in what it means. Is like, for example, someone, and this was, I took a course with somebody this summer, and they go, define your customer avatar. And I was going back to doing stuff, and you know what I discovered is I work best with an over 45, 50 crowd. Because
you connect easier?
Well, first of all, they're in my age group. But more importantly, they're at a stage in their business, if they're successful, where they need membership sites or e-learning to better leverage themselves. Because, for
That makes
example,
sense.
I work really well with speakers and coaches who they may be rocking, making a ton of money, but if they, God forbid, get hit by a bus, the business is worthless. It can't run
Yeah.
without them. They'll never retire. And they are really good candidates for a membership site. And really took a lot of introspection as who's really, really good. Startups are definitely out because they're not ready for what we have. I mean, unless they need a very specific membership site for
Sure, right.
But in many cases, they're in such a state of flux that they wouldn't make a good customer for me anyway. So
Yeah.
understanding who is not a good... Startups are also thinking, oh, we could do that ourselves. Oh, we've built websites before.
Yeah.
So it's like, nah, that's, warning, that's not a good match.
I think people spend so much time focusing just on leads, right, and traffic, that they forget that there is a gradient there. And some of those leads are, of course, qualified, but some of those leads are in that ambiguous zone, and some of them are most assuredly not qualified. And if you don't dig into those layers and that gradient, then it becomes a lot harder to identify the people as to which end of the spectrum they're on.
Right. So I can't, there are other people that I've had on the program that really get into identifying your customer avatars. There are people that run full-blown courses on this. And I can't stress enough how important it is for people to really nail that, because otherwise your messaging is in that gradient, I'm not sure, and you could inadvertently be servicing people that you shouldn't be doing business with and don't even know it.
Yeah. So I took a road trip this summer. I took a 3-week road trip, up to the Canadian Rockies of British Columbia and Alberta. It was a blast. And I had, this was in July, and I'd been diagnosed in May. So I was still sort of figuring out what it meant and where I should go and like how this would, show up in my life. And one thing I was really impressed with was these small mountain towns in the middle of these national parks in Canada, in Jasper and Banff, which are parks, but are also towns in those parks. There were literally restaurants that had those tabletop signs or those sidewalk signs out front advertising celiac friendly menu.
Really?
And it just, yes, I was prepared mentally to have to scour and ask questions, but they made it easy for me. And so, of course, they got my business. And I think there's something to be said for, if you identify that you do serve a niche within a niche, right? Then you need to help those people self-select by acknowledging, right? I'll give you a secret about your customers, and about my customers, about every customer. Your customers don't care who else you are a good fit for. They only care if you solve their problem, right?
Right.
And so if you solve, 3 or 4 or 5 problems, I only care about one of those solutions, right? And so it's a matter of finding the right people and connecting them with that, with the right message that says, hey, Greg, we're the right fit for you, right? That celiac-friendly restaurant, they may also have had, craft beer selection, and beer connoisseurs would be a good fit there, right? They may also have had some good vegan options, and people who choose a vegan diet would have been a good fit there. But the sign that I saw advertised specifically a celiac-friendly menu, which said, "Hey, I'm the person they're looking for there." So whatever that is for your business, whatever your niche is, you need to help get the right messaging in front of those people and find a way to make that super.
Yeah, and I tell you, self-selected customers are like the best.
Yeah. Right, because they know you've acknowledged here's a solution, and they've said that's the one I need, right?
Yeah. Well, and for example, anybody that's been to the Memberium site and looks at their implementation partner page, and because of that is calling me, should be a really good. And it's we put Memberium certified and things like that. But there are certain customer journeys that lead to us that go, oh, you are like right in our crosshairs. And it means good business for us, but also means great service and a solution for them.
Yeah, and think about when you go. You mentioned the grocery store, right, where there's a gluten-free area. There are a lot of things that are gluten-free that don't say gluten-free on them. Right. And unfortunately, I've been burned enough times. Gluten is one of those things where it shows up in stuff that you don't expect. It shows up in salad dressings. It shows up in soy sauce, right? I've been burned a few times over the last few months. It's been one of those processes where I find out only after I've gotten sick from it. And so I've gotten to the point where, I bought a bag of literally like frozen tater tots the other day from Target. It's Market Pantry, which is their brand. And I read the ingredients in the store really specifically, and it doesn't have anything that I would think would contain gluten. However, it doesn't say gluten-free. And so it's still sitting in my freezer. It's been a couple of weeks now, and I'm like, I'm kind of afraid to pull the trigger on it. It's been a while since I've had tater tots, because that's one of those things that's often contaminated. Right. So I thought, this will be cool. I can make them at home and, make my own thing. Yeah, right. But sure enough, I don't have the confidence in it. And it might be a simple packaging thing for them to just add it. But if you don't tell people that it's the right fit, then there's going to be some people who aren't sure if it's for them.
Well, think of me. I'm a consultant. And that, for a lot of people, is a dangerous term, because they've been burned by consultants.
Sure.
And so sometimes, and again, I have a questioning method that I use, and you can usually pretty quickly find someone that's been either burned by a consultant generically or by an Infusionsoft consultant, which now I got a double whammy. So, you have to be aware of those things, because here they could be, you could be their tater tots in the freezer that they're just dying to have, but they're going, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I wonder how long those will stay in there, or if I'll get bold, or what that'll look like.
I'll ask you in November when I see you. Well, hey,
exactly.
We've gone quite a while. Thank you so much for sharing this with you. Hey, if people want to get a hold of...
I hope it was helpful, yeah.
No, I mean,
thanks.
For me it was, and I think just to raise an awareness about, this issue, because if we pinpoint our market, we're right on. So if people want to reach you there at MonkeyPod, how do they find you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is through my website, MonkeyPodMarketing.com, but I'm also pretty active on Facebook. I've got a MonkeyPod Marketing page there. You may have seen me commenting in the various groups. I love helping out that way. And I'm active on Twitter. It's InfusionGreg. So at InfusionGreg on Twitter.
Cool. Well, we'll mark that down when we publish this on the site. And hey, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, sounds good. I will see you in a few weeks.
Take care.